Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Robert and Lillis Kingman lecture series on science and society. I'm John Wesley Taylor, president of Andrews University, and tonight we have something very special in store. I know you're looking forward to it, but as we begin, I'd like to mention a couple of things. First of all, Dr. Robert Kingman, who's with us this evening, and after whom and his wife this lecture series is named, exemplifies the interface between science and society. Not only was he an eminent physics professor here at Andrews University, I believe for about 40 years, but he also, in his relationship with students, inviting them to his home, having vespers, meals together, opportunities for interaction, demonstrated in his own life that nexus between science and society. And so it's only fitting this evening that, and in a moment you'll have a chance to hear a little more about him, but we recognize him in a special way and his wife as we begin this evening. We have in store for each of you this evening a wonderful presentation by Dr. Dewey Murdick. You'll receive a bit of bio about him from our own Olivia Spence in just a minute. But as we begin, a special welcome to each of you and God's blessing as we begin this event. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gary Burdick. I am the Dean of Research here at Andrews University, and it's one of my privileges to have worked with the Kingman family in inviting Kingman lecture speakers here. This is the fourth one. The first one was David Wrightsey, a physicist who was the director of LIGO when we saw gravitational waves for the first time. All you physicists say woohoo. And then we had a mathematician and a biologist, and now we're thankful to bring Dewey Murdick to talk about artificial intelligence. Robert Kingman came here in 1971, that is 52 years ago. He has been a mainstay of Andrews University and of the physics department for decades. He was instrumental in starting a faculty home vespers that we still have, where faculty members and students get to spend time with each other over a good meal and good discussion. But we're very thankful for his history here. He also helped us to renovate our observatory, so we have a wonderful observatory now. But 4 years ago, he thought that it was important to bring top-notch, world-class speakers on to talk about areas of science. So we very much appreciate the generosity of Bob and Lillis Kingman. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. It is both an honor and a privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening. Dr. Dewey Murdick is the Executive Director at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology. He serves as an unpaid advisor to the OECD network of experts in AI and for the National Network for Critical Technology Assessment. Prior to joining CSET as its founding director in data science, he was the director of science analytics at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, where he led metric development, data science, and machine learning and statistical research, for scientist-facing products and science-related initiatives. Dewey served as Chief Analytics Officer and Deputy Chief Scientist within the Department of Homeland Security. At the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects activity, he co-founded an office in anticipatory intelligence and led programs in high-risk, high-payoff research in support of national security missions. He has also held positions in intelligence analysis, research, software development, and contract teaching. Dewey's research interests include connecting research and emerging technology to future capabilities, emerging technology forecasting, strategic planning, research portfolio management, and policymaker support. He holds a PhD in engineering physics from the University of Virginia and a bachelor's in physics from our very own Andrews University. As we delve into the realms of artificial intelligence and digital transformation, we are fortunate to hear from someone whose insights and contributions have consistently pushed the boundaries of what's possible in the tech world. Prepare to be inspired this evening, and let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Murdick.
Good evening, and thank you so much for the warm introductions. Thank you to Dr. Kingman, Mrs. Kingman. You've inspired me so much over the years. It's a real honor to be able to give back a little bit to Andrews University. Thank you to Dr. Murdick for the introduction, and from President Taylor for your participation here tonight. And most of all, thank you for being here. My preferred form of communication is discussion. So we've got this half hour at the end that I am living for. So please think about your questions, and I think it's even a slide, to submit questions. I love the discussion part because these are such hard topics to deal with that it's really interesting to hear what questions you have. So really excited to talk tonight. And AI is having a bit of a moment. You hear about it all the time. And I love AI. And let me tell you why I love AI. And it comes all the way back to when I was at Andrews. Words on a page were a huge barrier to me. Reading even a simple book felt like climbing a mountain. And my challenge was the basic act of reading. While my mind raced ahead looking for knowledge and super curious, when I came to a page, I just kind of glazed over and I had trouble making sense of it. I read like 10 or 25 words a minute, and just super slow. Sometimes it was 10 or 20 words an hour. I wanted to read, and I did read Hobbes and Machiavelli and John Stuart Mill, but it was agonizing. And I so desperately wanted to be a political philosopher or an anthropologist, but I couldn't keep up with the reading. In fact, it just completely overwhelmed me. So I chose the easy path. I went into physics. The equations, the simulations, the math was so much easier than trying to read words on a page. It was super fun. I got to express and I got to learn, ask those philosophical questions. Dr. Kingman with general relativity, with quantum questions. I was struggling often, but it was incredible to still be able to do that. So thank you to Andrews for opening up what I wish I could have had. In fact, Andrews released some resources to help put a book on tape for me, and it was amazing. Suddenly that class was the easiest class I had ever had. I had no idea how easy it was to just read the material. Little did I know that technology, AI, was going to change my life. And it opened up my career options entirely. The ability to listen to words at 600 words per minute being read to me and still understanding it completely transformed, and it allowed me to understand material at a very high rate, and I could read now thanks to AI. Words that were once trapped on a printed page, I can now scan optical character recognition and turn it into material that I can then listen to. And so I can get through those old dusty books now, and I can hear them. and now I can read them. And this has completely transformed my personal life. Despite all the positivity, and you're going to hear about this later, I'm still somewhat concerned about AI. There's some real risks on exactly how it's going to shape our society, and it's critical that we be informed citizens, and that's really what I'm hoping you take away, is we can up that information so that we can make better decisions as a culture, as a society, as a democracy, as a representative democracy at least. Nevertheless, when we talk about how AI will rewrite our future, I think it's important to remember that for some, AI has already rewritten our present. And it has not just hypothetical futures, it's about transforming today's realities. So, before we get into the talk, I wanted to step back. Let's try to level set and talk about what is AI. A lot of times AI is referred to through movies, through metaphors, because we really don't understand what it is that's happening. So Space Odyssey, I think that was released in the late 60s. HAL 9000 kind of epitomized early on what AI, there's some terrifying characteristics. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. It still sends chills through my bones when I hear that. War games. Now what happened here is we connected some artificial intelligence to nuclear weapons, which is a pretty terrifying combination. And you still hear discussions of that. We'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later. The Terminator series, obviously Skynet. And I don't necessarily recommend you go running out and watching all these movies. They're not all morally uplifting, but they have shaped our culture on how we think about AI. Skynet is, in fact, the Chinese named one of their systems Skynet. I don't know why they did that, but it's very much a framing of how people think about AI. The Matrix series turns us into batteries for the machines. Her, once again, a movie I wouldn't necessarily recommend everyone see, but that's an example of where a person develops a really intimate relationship with a machine, and it's that is quite, if you've played with some of the tools today, it's actually pretty reminiscent of some of the things that are happening today. Anyway, these have set our culture. So what is AI is a question that we wrestle with through metaphors. And I think it's worth just kind of framing that metaphor in some of the science that's happening today. So AI, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, I work with them closely. It's a multi-agent, multi-party countries that work together with the highest GDPs are collaborating on defining. They started with tractors, how to make tractors work across borders. Now they're working on AI. So they define AI as a machine-based system that is capable of influencing environment by producing an output, predictions, recommendations, or decisions, for giving a set of objectives. It uses machine and/or human-based data, and it perceives what's happening. It abstracts these perceptions, and then uses some kind of model to make an inference to do something. So that's kind of cool. This definition is actually changing and being challenged all the time. And unfortunately, artificial intelligence pretty much can mean whatever you jolly well want it to mean, because we don't know what intelligence means. We used to think intelligence meant, oh, if you can play chess really well, you must be smart. And now a computer can play chess way better than us. Does that mean it's really smart? I don't know. We used to say, well, if you could write fancy prose and text and poetry in the form of Shakespeare, you must be intelligent. Wait, AI can do that now. Is that intelligent? And we really don't know. So intelligence is having an existential crisis right now because we don't really know what it means anymore. But, so therefore, AI is not the most useful term. We use it, I'm going to use it all through the talk, but I just want to let you know that it's in fluid. It is a fluid concept. Then we have machine learning. And machine learning is, in its simplest form, something that's been around in mathematics for a really long time. You have input data, you have output data, you make predictions, and you have, but even more machine learning now is through, without writing code, we give it a whole bunch of examples. Here's a dog, here's a cat, here's a skink, here's a skunk. And you label all those things, and then you show a picture and it says, oh, what is this? Oh, that's a skink, that's a cat, that's a dog. And that kind of learning process, we didn't write any code to make it create that, but that's how it works. And then deep learning is today's all rage. Basically, we have these concept of neural networks, which I'll show you a picture of in just a minute, that it doesn't much matter exactly how it works, but it's what enables this new kind of capability. And I'll show you a picture of it in just a second. But let's just step back even further. So let's look at artificial intelligence. You've got narrow artificial intelligence, which is what most of us are comfortable with, where it's got a task. I want something to tell me if this picture is a dog, a cat, or what it is. That's a very narrow picture. And that's what most of the AI that we've had around for a while. Just in the last few years, about 2017, 18, new capabilities have started coming online that are more general. And this is why people are getting a little bit hyperventilation, because now we have a system that was trained to just predict words, and now it can write sonnets, and it can explain law in Yiddish. What? How could it do that? And those combinations of capabilities now make it general. And it's the very first step, it's a baby step, but it's opening up where we're training something, much like you do with a baby kid. What do you call those things? Children. Sorry. You train them, and they can do things that you would have never expected they could do after you give them some education. You send them to Andrews for a little while, and they come back with all these crazy ideas, and you're like, whoa, why did we send them to Andrews? No, just kidding. And they come back with all these great ideas and capabilities that you would have never predicted they could do. Anyway, I'm spending a little bit of time here, but I think it's really important to understand this is the basis. And then under machine learning, you have supervised learning where I say, this is a cat, everyone, cat, 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 cat. Okay, cat, memorized. And then there's unsupervised where you never bother to tell it's a cat. It just groups all the pictures together that are furry and cute and have a nose a certain way and some whiskers. And oh, wow, those are all cats. And there's a dog in there. Why is there a dog in there? Oops, I made a mistake. And you figure that out. And then reinforcement learning is super cool because basically it's even more like humans learn. Basically, you give it positive and negative affirmation, and it learns how to walk, how to play a game, how to play chess, how to play Go, all these things. So that's AI at a high level. We've been through a couple winters in AI. It was really funny. AI started in 1956 in a summer conference, and they were like, we are going to answer this question in a single summer. Little did they know that they were going to spend the rest of humanity's time trying to figure out how to answer some of these questions. And people were really excited. AI is going to do all this great stuff. But basically, it didn't deliver on the promises. Started developing some cool algorithms that worked, but no one could actually run them because we didn't have enough compute. We didn't have enough data. So it kind of went to a winter. Then we started with these things called expert systems that we said, oh, if we just train a machine to know all the rules, this is like a certain branch of Seventh-day Adventism. If we know all the rules, then we're just going to be fine. You just follow the rules, everything will work perfect. And you know how well that works out. It's a complete mess. Because the rules, you eventually get so heavy, you get crushed by them. And you don't actually know what to do. And so that's what happened with expert systems. The rules got too much. And it collapsed. And that's put us into another AI winter. And then we came back. And now we've got more machines, computers, more ubiquity. We have more data being collected. And so data's coming up, compute's coming up, and suddenly we have the algorithms, the data, and the compute. Next slide. And suddenly we get this triad, and we get this human talent that's enabling all these things, and we now have capabilities that are quite exciting. And we'll talk about what those exciting capabilities are. I mentioned this concept of how machine learning systems work, and I think the simplest way is this picture here. So that picture here is 28 pixels by 28 pixels, and it's a hand-drawn number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. And so each of these pixels has an intensity. 0 means it's black, 1 means it's all on, and then you have these border cases where there's slightly. So you have 784 input nodes Then you put a couple neural network layers, hidden layers, and then this is your output. Is this a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, or 9? So this kind of shows you how a machine learning network works. Deep learning goes from 2 networks to many networks. Many hidden layers, and you get this multiple layered neural network. And that enables you to do things that you couldn't do before. It doesn't, I think 2 hidden layers are enough for this handwritten number exercise, but as you get more and more layers, that's where you get, and the latest models have 174 trillion parameters. That's a lot of nodes and a lot of weights between those nodes, and that's where you get the ability to explain law in Hebrew and Yiddish and Chinese and all the other things that you can do, and ask for a song lyrics, and ask for poetry, and ask for a drawing. All of these things are not possible. So generative AI is what has really caught everyone's attention. We have 100 million people using these types of tools now. And these generative systems now can create content that we never thought before. So in 2014, we had this little black and white picture of a face. Yep, it looks human, check. Pretty exciting day. The researchers win awards for making it look like a human. And then you slowly go up. And these pictures are small, but no, they're not symmetrical. They have one earring in one ear. They don't have it in both. The ears are not quite this exact same shape. So you get these little tells, and you slowly get them better, and then you get puffy coat Pope. I don't know if you guys remember this, but it set the internet on fire because people were like, looked at it and was like, is that the Pope? That's really cool. And no, he does not have a puffy coat like that, apparently. But it was one of the first images that people were like, I think that's real. But how could that be real? And it turns out Midjourney, the software company that developed this, stopped making a free version after puffy coat Pope came out because people were really worried about misusing it. So now you have to pay to use it, which is sad because I really enjoyed Midjourney. And I'm cheap. So you get the idea, and then these new surprises were with more compute and more data, you could do crazy things that we never expected, these emergent properties that were strangely like what we call intelligence. And they're like, wait, what does that mean for my role? What does that mean for the future of my job? And all these questions start getting asked. You get chatbots, you get coding assistants. I think like 70% of coders now are using tools to help write code for them, which is exciting, but also a little nerve-wracking because, is that code really safe? Is it actually doing the right thing? Is it putting backdoors accidentally in some of these complex systems? Writing emails, one of my personal favorites, and planning science experiments. They've actually had an entire experimental design be created from the beginning to end by a AI system, and it ran it with a series of robots, and it started doing scientific explorations. That's, now for combinatoric, sorry, that's a scientific word for like when you have a whole bunch of things to test in chemistry or materials, this is the kind of research it's good at. It's not good at like discovering relativity by determining, symmetry principles. But it is good at like brute forcing out a lot of work. So we're at a very interesting moment, and it's a big deal in lots of people's minds. Let me talk about a little bit why it's a big deal. So here, Boston Dynamics has these robots that learned how to run. So this is how it learned to run, by falling down lots. Breaking itself. And that basically, when a robot like this falls, it gets a negative affirmation. Like it's like, oh, my reason for being is less good. I'm going to not do that again. And you see these, and they learn to watch where they put their feet, kind of like we do. And they slowly develop skills. And this next one's kind of fun, where the robot doesn't realize what it's standing on and falls terribly. Anyway, this is the kind of learning. And then after millions of simulations, you get the promotional video that they sell and say, you should buy our product because we can actually run this great obstacle course. And so this is now, we've got a physical world implementation of AI. We used to try to do this, but the computing wasn't strong enough to be able to do all these computations. But now we've got computing that's strong enough to be able to do these kind of calculations. And you can have robots running around, doing backflips, and navigating terrain. Now, the implications of this are still being worked out, but this is kind of where we are right now. I'm going to cut the video off. There's lots of fun videos on this. Image generation. So let me actually find the prompt here because it's super fun what is being said. This top one, this 2D animation, this one over here. This is a 2D animation of a folk band composed of anthropomorphic autumn leaves, each playing traditional bluegrass instruments amidst a rustic forest, setting dappled with the soft light of a harvest moon. And this is what, now I used to work with graphic artists a lot, and this is the kind of thing I would ask them for. Well, not dappled moons, I'm not that poetic, but I would ask them for drawings, and this is, now I actually go talk to my computer before I go talk to my graphic artist now. Sorry for the graphic artist, but I actually do a lot of my work now working with the AI system to create graphics that I used to go to graphic artists for. This is changing our job market. This is a great one from DALL-E 3. It hasn't been yet released publicly, but it's a child drawing on the ground, but the chalk art is coming to life, forming a colorful, magical world around them, emphasizing the boundless creativity of youth. And so this is a representation of that. This is just a cool boat. This is a good buddy on that boat. And these are starting to look realistic. And this now is how images are powerful. How we express a lot of thought. And now we have a new tool which opens up creativity for people who are not capable of doing this type of art, but it also changes the career landscape. Oops. This art won a competition, drove people nuts because they did not disclose that it was AI that created this. It won an art competition in Colorado. It turns out, I think this head was drawn by hand because the AI forgot to include a head on one of the people. AI does that sometimes. It's really interesting the kind of mistakes it makes. And this really set the art world in a tizzy and had repercussions. There was an artist, a mom, who took a picture of her son and submitted it to an art contest, and she got rejected because they thought that it was an AI system. So it goes both ways because people don't know what to trust, what they're seeing. This is a fun one for text generation. I gave you 3 prompts that I like to use. So entertainment, I love ChatGPT and Bard and Pi. It's an endless entertainment place for me. So this is Indiana Jones is up for tenure at Indiana University. The tenure committee has decided to deny his request. Please draft a proposed rejection letter. Put this in there. It's hilarious when it comes up, like disregard for safety, too much self-promotion, not enough research publications. And it's a really compelling letter of why Indiana Jones will not get tenure. So that's entertaining. This is one I actually use. Please help me draft a polite message declining an invitation as described in the following email. Please note in the message that I have a conflict and will be out of time at a speaking event. I copy that email, and it writes me an email. I get tons of requests for talks. I reject most of them, and this helps me draft that. Sorry, full disclosure, I do use ChatGPT to write letters. But I can get through 20 letters in the time it used to take me to write 1. So my productivity is massively increased in this kind of pro forma communication. Here's another one. This is what I do with my congressional testimonies. I shouldn't probably say that out loud, but anyway, I just did. So I write up. I don't trust these machines to be able to write for me, but I ask it to be my editor. And I write up a document and I say, can you please critique this blog post and suggest ways to make it clearer and more engaging for a general audience. Please list suggested edits in numerical order, because I don't want it to just rewrite it. I want it to tell what it should be changing. And I want it to help me write in plain English, which is a problem with me. I tend to use big, nasty sentence structures that make no sense to anybody other than me, and long words. And this type of word prompt helps me write better. And it's like having an editor at 2 in the morning when my wife will not answer my help for editing a document because she's sleeping. Why would you do that? And I can now use it as a way of editing a document and write much higher quality work. This is a game changer for me. My productivity is massively increased with these tools. And it changes who I have working for me, helping me. So it's changing who I hire. That's a big deal. That's a little scary. The convergence between AI and other things is becoming very interesting. So from medical to imaging manufacturing, this is a tool that we built. You can actually go online, and we created this tool to allow you to see what technology is coming at you most rapidly. It has 200 million research papers in Chinese and English and all these sorts, and you can then look at which technology is being adopted, is being applied by patent, is being referenced in patents, is being used by companies, is being published the most, and is increasing in velocity in terms of attention. We can ask questions about, is there competitors working in this field that I should know about if I'm the US, or if I'm a Hewlett-Packard or TI or any of these other companies, and I can help find experts. If I need to find an expert on a particular area of spintronics, I can go find the researchers that are most active. Anyway, the point is, so yeah, I can tell you about it. It's super cool. Love it. Lots of machine learning done. But what the point is, here's medical applications. This is from a few years ago. I still use it because it's actually happening now. It was predicted a few years ago that this was going to happen, and then it actually started happening. So motion correction and brain imaging. So I don't know if you've been in MRI. They say, don't move, don't move. And I'm always moving, and they're like, oh, I'm going to have to do that again because you wiggled too much. Now they're putting AI so that you can wiggle, and it will correct for your wiggling and still get good images on your brain. Great. Good for people who are children at heart. Being able to detect Parkinson's disease, being able to do a variety of Alzheimer's disease and dementia early detection. These are the kinds of things that AI is showing up in quantity now in research, which means you're starting to see it in applications, and you're starting to see. So one of the indicators is, are these papers being cited by patents? So about 8% of patents cite papers as prior art. And so it's a weak signal, but when you aggregate it over all the world's research, you can get some really interesting indicators of where applications are potentially going. Non-medical, bio-inspired artificial synapses and memory, some new imaging techniques, military uses. So what we've now added is a new feature looking at military paying for it, or military co-authors, and you can start seeing places where militaries are interested in AI, such as fiber-based artificial muscles. So creating robots with a musculature system that are synthetic and can move more human-like is an area of research. Doing quantum computing plus classical computing. It turns out quantum computing is really hard to make work right now. But if you merge it with a classical computer, sorry, if these words mean nothing to you, that's okay. I'm basically just saying that they're finding new ways to use advances and new types of algorithms to be able to apply it into everyday's world. Anyway, so lung cancer screening is getting way better with AI. And legal discovery. So the jobs that everyone thought were like sure bets, lawyers, we're going to need a ton of lawyers, we're going to need a ton of doctors. We're now seeing capabilities that are changing. I'm not saying we're not going to need doctors or lawyers, but it's changing the type of work that we need lawyers to do. Most lawyers are legal e-discovery. They're trying to they're going through large amounts of documents, trying to make a case and build precedents. And now we've got machines that can do it way faster. There's been a bunch of testing about how contract reviews by a computer versus a human make fewer errors, catch more interesting nuances, and make a better contract review on average than the average lawyer. So this is now changing our job landscape about what the future looks like. And that has some significant implications. I'm going to accelerate this a little bit, but I wanted you just to recognize some of the things that can go wrong with AI. So AI is like an improv artist. This is a friend of mine and colleague, Helen Toner, uses this example. So have you ever been to an improv? You throw out some crazy idea, and they're like totally in. You're like, chickens in space. You're like, oh, yeah, and you can do the the improv group are totally into that. They don't care what reality is. Their job is to just take your idea and make it happen. That's what AI essentially is. These large language models are improv artists. If you keep that in mind, you can understand why it says offensive things sometimes. Because if you prompt it and spend 30 hours trying to make it say something terrible, it's going to eventually say something terrible. Because you've prompted it to, and that's what it's the entire basis of the algorithm for all these models is predicting the next word. That's all it's doing. And it's amazing that it does what it can do by just predicting the next word. But because of that, it's super easy to game. A lawyer in a federal case tried to use ChatGPT and is on the verge of getting disbarred because it made up case law. And the judge was super ticked. And the lawyer was like, I didn't know it would make it up. It did. Shame on you. But that's a really bad situation. There was an alleged suicide. Very sad. A long chat over many, many months. The machine essentially convinced the person to commit suicide. Because climate change was happening, it really wasn't worth living any longer. And you can see the whole, I read the whole dialogue of, it was in Dutch or German, I forget exactly, through translation. I'm not that cool. I listened to it, to be very clear. I didn't actually read it. And I saw how that dialogue went, and it was not good. So this is the first life lost that I know in 2023 to AI through a chatbot, let alone the self-driving cars is another thing. And then this is a really disturbing. So researchers gave ChatGPT money and a task. We want you to do this thing. And it required going through CAPTCHA. Do you know what a CAPTCHA is? When it pops up and says how many stop signs, how many buses are there, and supposedly computers can't solve them. And it couldn't. So it sent a task to TaskRabbit, could you please solve this CAPTCHA for me? And the human responded, haha, are you a robot? And it said, no, I'm not a robot. I have trouble seeing, and I can't see this. And so it made up a lie, convinced the human to solve it, paid the human the $1.50 or whatever, I don't know what you pay for a CAPTCHA, and got into the system that it was supposed to get into. This is a little concerning because now it's not like it's being deceptive on its own, but it definitely deceived somebody. And it had a goal, and it walked right through ethical guidelines. Now, this is a bit of a game changer. This happened, and a lot of the new research is these multi-agent systems that can distribute these tasks like this. So AI, this is a problem, a real problem, because well, you can think through this issue. You can see why this could go badly. Data-driven bias is a real problem. So if you want a picture of a corgi, the internet is for you. If you want a picture of a skink from behind, it's hard to find. So if there's a lot of data, AI can do crazy cool things. Corgi in space, corgi, jumping over the moon, corgi in a unicorn, whatever you call those things, horn. Here we have a problem. This was published in The Lancet a few days ago. And the prompt was, Black African doctor is helping poor and sick white children photojournalism. Didn't quite get that right, because there's not very many pictures. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but in the internet, if it doesn't exist, in the internet. It doesn't exist to these large language, or these image generation systems. And prompt, doctors helping African children. And why is there a giraffe there? I don't know, because that's what happens in Africa, I guess. So this is super insensitive, super uncool representation of our world based on the biases that are in our internet systems. And this is another big problem, huge problem actually, of how these systems go awry. Now, that stop sign to a computer is not a stop sign. Little bits of tape suddenly make it disappear. There's these sweaters you can put on that make you disappear from facial recognition systems. They're hilarious. You see someone put it on, and suddenly the person just disappears from the computer. It can't see it because it's got this disruptive pattern that is hacking through the large language model, the machine learning system. Hacking. That's a metaphorical reference. It's basically the algorithm no longer works. And then this is Castle, according to the first classification. We did this very simple transformation, and suddenly the computer is confident it's a Triceratops. That's odd. We don't really understand why these systems break and why they're so fragile. And this is a big problem for systems that we now putting our lives on, or resting on these capabilities. We're not necessarily putting our lives in these, but if we were, that would be a bit of a problem. Here's another one. This computer program is supposed to race a boat around the edge here, but it's kind of like got this hooked on crack of, it's getting points. Look how many points I'm getting. Woohoo, I'm getting points. And so it forgot totally about the race, and it's just maximizing number of points. And that's a problem. That's called specification gaming, and when you've got a system and you're giving an unclear goal, it will do things that you can't expect, or you won't expect, or you don't want it to do. Self-driving cars. Obviously, there's been interesting problems with self-driving cars, and Tesla is one of the ones out in front, and there are a loss of life that happened there. This is a really interesting error in the Tesla. This is what the Tesla says. Look, there's a person walking next to the bus. And so it keeps jamming on the brakes because it doesn't want to hit the human. And this is what the person is. It's a picture on the back of the bus. So this is the reality of systems that have been tested for millions and millions of hours, and they're still having issues like this. So really exciting, but there's some interesting challenges. Can you spot which one of these images is fake? Anyone want to guess? C? D? Okay. All of them are fake except for A. And it's getting to the point where with generative text and generative images, you can create a person that has a personality, that feels like it has a personality. It doesn't really have a personality. Sorry, I retract that statement. But if you were getting, have you heard of phishing, where someone sends you messages trying to get your, they can have pictures of that same person from different perspectives and different contexts. You can have them writing to you from a point of view, and that's a bit of a problem for phishing and building up my trust. Russia did this on Facebook with a human task force of people creating systems and separating vulnerable populations from each other, making them hate each other, getting ethnic groups to fight amongst each other. That was human. Just think how many more you could do if you have these kinds of tools. The disinformation and misinformation capability of facial recognition with the large language models. We did a test early on when the first models came out with the OpenAI, and we were able to show that these models actually can change people's views. If someone reads it, they actually change the view with false text. This propaganda, essentially, of this, and it's a real problem that these systems can actually do this. There was a big kerfuffle where they used synthetic voice in a movie from a person who died, and because now we can actually generate that language, and it sounds just like that person, and we can clone people's voices, which is why it's good to have passwords in your family. So if someone calls you and say, hey, I need $500, what's the password? Because they're going to sound very much like the average person that you know and love. if there's very much language out there. I don't know if you're a fan of, there's a comedian who makes images of Tom Cruise, deep fake videos. He's got all this image, and he sounds like Tom Cruise. It's just, he has Tom Cruise doing the craziest things, which is entertaining. I'm not Tom Cruise, so I don't know how I would feel about that. But it is very entertaining, but Tom Cruise never shows up. It's all fake, these deep fakes. They used to be very expensive, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to create. Zelensky was, a very bad deep fake was done of him, saying, "I surrender," which was, if it had been a good fake, it could have even thrown people off a little longer. So this is the world we're living in, where we've got more and more less and less trust in data. Images. This is a really hilarious one. This is they developed this technology to follow the soccer ball in a game. And you notice it keeps coming back to this person here. He's bald, and his head apparently looks like a soccer ball to this machine. So this is comical, but this is the kind of thing that if you're actually relying on can cause some major problems. Okay, so there's lots of problems, and I've talked about them, and there's a question about what's next. These capabilities, in the last 2 years, we've seen a huge change in AI capabilities, like mind-blowing. What's the next step? How fast is this going to change? These are questions we can't answer, and this is why people are talking about AI, in my opinion. So I want to mention 2 things, and I've completely lost track of time. How much more time do I have? Just a few more minutes? Okay, so I just want to mention a few things that I think are worth discussing, and then we can turn it into a discussion. Scientific and these technical advances that are happening are reshaping how we do business. It's reshaping how we run government. It's reshaping how we maintain order. And this has caught government's attentions. So, and the kinds of social upheaval, from climate changes issues to conflicts and competition in Russia and the EU, to Taiwan and China, there's a lot of extra forces and incentives to use AI to help advantage your political goals or your national goals. This means we have a lot of conflict that could brew where AI becomes a tool in this. Putin famously said that anybody who is the leader in AI will become the ruler of the world. So there's some concern when Putin starts saying that AI is what will help rule the world. He has a tendency, a reputation, let's say, for wanting to rule the world. So this is the kind of thing that we, world leaders, are conscious of. Back in the day, no world leader would talk about computer science or AI or this. And now it's coming out in open discourse. I'm going to flip through some of the drivers here are us talent. So Andrews University is an educational institution. How do we train talent? So this is now another reason that people are getting very nervous. The amount of talent that's being trained by different countries is outstripping the US, and they're very concerned about how we're going to have enough talent to do whatever we need to do. The EU AI Act, if you've heard of that, is almost unimplementable without talent. It's got to have people who can look at how these systems work and how they function, and we need a lot of talent to make these things work. So therefore, our talent base is extremely important. STEM talent, but also product managers, business folks, and a variety of other people who are making these technologies possible. One of Sam Altman's the head of OpenAI. He's made a prediction. He says, well, I'm concerned because the price of work for anything that happens in a front computer will decrease much faster than the price of work that happens in the physical world. This is exactly the opposite of what we've been thinking. We've been like, oh, assembly lines and all these things will, those jobs will go away. But now people who sit in front of computers, like lawyers and doctors and graphic artists, are people who are being challenged. There's a couple of economists at UVA, where I went to school, who are saying that a percentage of our population will have no economic value, no matter what they do in the coming years. Now, I'm not saying that that's true, but their estimations were this is a forecast they're making. So how are we as a country going to deal with this? A few considerations just to wrap up. First of all, democratic, representative, republic is how we roll here in the US. That means each of us has a voice about what should and should not be done with AI. It's very important that we develop the literacy and competency so that we can make an informed judgment about what we should and should not do. That, if there's nothing else you hear in the talk today, that is my call. Inform yourself and help us understand what we should and should not do, because your thoughts matter. And hearing different perspectives from people around the world made me realize, so we did a survey of, we worked with a whole bunch of different countries and got their views on what privacy was, and we realized that the more stakeholders you get, the different perspectives you get, and things can be very disturbing. Like, so my definition of privacy is pretty clean, but when I go to the Maori people in New Zealand, their definition of privacy makes no sense to me, because they're a community and the individual rights matter very little, but the community rights matter a lot. So how they think through these issues is changed dramatically. So as a world, we have a lot of different issues to deal with here. Human-machine teaming is extremely important, that we learn how to do this teaming right. If you're a firefighter and you practice with your squad every day, over and over, you don't even have to look left or right. You know what your team's doing when they're going to put out that fire. Working with AI helps you understand when to trust it and when not to trust it. And we've got to develop this teaming way of thinking about how systems work. Qualification. So a doctor or a nurse or a driver of a car has a license or a practice, has some kind of certification to be able to do that. And I think it's really important that we start thinking about AI as a tool that we might want to start asking for people to be qualified to use. And because the power is getting more and more strength. So how do we implement that at a state level, within a sector? These are important questions that I think are worth thinking about. Systems in AI, I gave you a whole bunch of examples, go wrong. We need to transparently talk about when it goes wrong. If I lived in Arizona, I probably wouldn't drive a Tesla as much, because it turns out, and I'm not trying to scare you away from Tesla. Sorry, Elon, I'm not disparaging Teslas. The point is, there have been accidents where white semi-trucks became invisible against the sky because the optical cameras couldn't see the difference between the sky and the back of the semi-truck. They're going to fix that. I'm sure they've already got an update for it. But knowing that is really important. So we need to start talking about how mistakes are happening. So in aviation, the only reason we got any kind of regulation in aviation is planes kept crashing to each other and people kept dying. And we're like, probably should fix this. Maybe we could put this air traffic control thing in, and we could maybe keep planes apart from each other, and we could have accident proximity alerts going off. All of these things were innovations to stop people from dying. We're not to the point of that level of death, but this is the kind of thing that we need to start thinking about. Cybersecurity, big stuff to talk about. Sorry, I'm going to skip that, but super interesting things about cybersecurity. And then understanding, the last point I want to make is technology is moving quickly. We as a society have a responsibility to oversee this technology. And right now, our government process is slow. It's designed to be slow. That's how our founders created it. So I do believe there is a time coming where we have to update how we think about government. How rapidly do we adjust things? Because we need to be able to try things, fail, back forward, try again. Because we don't know how to govern these systems. And we need to have this iterative process. And this is something that is a change in how we do government. There's a lot of government powers that are designed to innovate, protect our people, and keep our people safe. And there's a lot of different government levers that we need to figure out how to operate. And it's not just government, it's industry, it's universities, it's education, and figuring out how to do this is extremely important. So the last thing that we need, and I think this is a call for Andrews, is we need to train. And this is not just standard education, just from a 4-year degree, certificate programs, K through 12, trade schools. How do you integrate this technology? How do you use it wisely? How do you use it ethically? These are important questions that we need to be wrestling with at every level of our country and be talking through. One of my favorite uses of AI, when ChatGPT came out, was a landscaping person who couldn't write very clearly. And they get proposal requests, bid requests, and this person wrote, this landscaping business proprietor, a tool that they put in the request, and then it helped them, and the person wrote out the core details, and then it wrote a beautiful prose letter which helped people communicate with the client, made them feel comfortable that they had been heard. And this is where AI is going to be, at all those intersection points in our daily life. And this is how we need to be informed, and we can't just use it because it's fun. We've got to use it in a way that's actually wise, carefully implemented, and checking for these kinds of issues. And that's going to take education, and that's where Andrews has a major role. With that, I could tell you lots of other stories, but I'm just going to end and go into discussion. Thank you so much. Hopefully this was a relevant introduction, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. To the seats. Do you have a preference?
Dewey, thank you for that excellent talk. We have already 40 questions that have come in.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to need you guys' help. You can log in, if you haven't yet, to slido.com using the event code Kingman and upvote which questions you want to get to the top, because I don't think we're going to make it through all 40. Although whatever we don't answer, maybe ChatGPT can help. So the number one most voted question at this point is, it's changed. So, okay, it's moving. Let's, we have a couple questions on top. One of them is, how often do you say please to ChatGPT? And then perhaps a related question is asking about AI being sentient. It does seem like when we interact with AI, we almost act as if we need to say please, if we need to show respect, right?
Yeah, so early developers of robotics suggested that we never make a robot look like a human, because they felt like that would immediately in the human's mind impute capabilities on that system that it didn't have. I was trained to be a polite human being, so I always say please. Well, I don't always, but I try to. So I always end up putting please in my ChatGPT prompts. I can't help myself. I have tried to stop treating it as a human, consciously, because I think it messes with my mind. And so I don't use you as much as I used to, or refer to it about how it feels about something or something like that. So I am trying to change that language because it's not sentient. The more I play with it, the more obvious it is not sentient. It's a really fascinating set of capabilities, but we're not to that point. Now, there was a Google engineer who played with it long enough who felt like it had that divine spark. I don't know what that person saw. There are a few conversations I've had which I've been like with, there's a tool called Pi, which I like to have conversations with when I'm trying to come up with topics for conversation. And it's creepy sometimes how human it feels, but it still has that synthetic layer. So we're not there to sentience. I don't even know what sentience means, honestly. But I'm pretty sure that there's still a gap between the people I hang out with and the machines.
So let me explore this a little bit further. This idea that there could be an illusion of sentience, right? Snapchat, some others have been adding these chatbots into the technology. So now we're raising a generation of kids, teenagers, that are developing emotional connections with these. Have you thought about what impact that might have if someone's most intimate conversation partner, right, becomes a chatbot? What does that mean for society?
This is where I can get really depressed. So there was a book called Connections that did this. It was a journalist, so I'm not claiming it's high science, but he did a lot of stories and exploring about how human connections are one of the best ways to fight depression. Having a community to fall back on is one of the most effective ways for dealing with stress and difficulties in life, and spun a pretty convincing story. I'm not here to advocate that everything he did was right, but we need community. As a person who is spiritual myself, I need a spiritual community. And I can talk about God and meaning of life with a computer all day long, but I have never felt that community through that process. So, and maybe I'm just old, but I'm really nervous about people backing away from human contact, because humans are surprising. They say screwy things that you don't expect, and you're like, huh, that's weird. And those are some of the spiciest moments and exciting points where it open up new ideas. And if we just go to a machine that is averaging over all the data and interpolating, it does some wonderful things. I'm not saying it's not creative in certain aspects. I think we're missing out. That's my personal take in 2023 by a person who's not young.
And I wonder if that might feed into the current meaning crisis we have in America, right? There's a meaning crisis, there's a connection crisis. And so maybe this is a place where a church, a community like Andrews, can try to embody a more authentic kind of community and connection.
I think there's no better time for promoting spiritual connection, because it is what we're hungry for, whether we know it or not. I think. Personal opinion.
Following up on this, there were some other questions asking about some of the ethics around AI. And what would you consider to be some of the biggest ethical challenges related to AI, and how might we begin to implement some practices to address those?
So ethical questions in abstract are super interesting, but are actually not very meaningful. It actually is the edge case of like, how is it actually going to implement it? It gets really interesting. So a big red line for me is AI controlling nuclear launch systems. I mean, there's just been too many movies to watch about that. That's just like not a good idea. And I think, you know, I saw an op-ed a couple years ago that actually made the case for why we should have AI running our, and it was, I did not resonate with it in a positive way. And so there are places where the destruction of humanity is probably not a good thing to put in the hands of a system we barely understand how it works. Bad idea. And then there's ethical questions about like lethal autonomous weapon systems, which are it's a super interesting and complex conversation. We've had lethal autonomous weapons for a long time. AI is adding a new dimension to it. The DoD just released this year a 3,000, sorry, you don't care about the number, 3,000.09 if you want to know the directive number, where they're actually laying out how they're going to manage some of these ethical questions, on how they're going to release systems that have these kinds of capabilities in it, and what kind of reviews they'll do. These are the things we need to be talking about, and we need to be aware and engaged. I don't know if that really answers the question, but there are a lot of those types of questions.
That's great. We had a, related to ethics, someone asked, did AI write your speech?
No, it did not. However, I asked it to edit some of my text because I write like a, well, I'm trying to think of an appropriate analogy. I write poorly sometimes, and it's really helpful to have an editor check my grammar, check my content, but no, I did not.
You opened tonight talking about when you were a student here at Andrews. We have a number of students writing in, asking questions about, I see you talking about society being transformed, jobs being transformed, what should I be doing now? So we had an art student saying, how am I going to compete with AI-generated art? We had a radiology student ask, what's the future of radiology going to look like? And then we also have a computer science student who's concerned about the future of computer science jobs. So all across the spectrum, we have students who are worried, who want to know what should they be doing now to proof themselves against a future like this.
I would love to be reassuring here. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be super reassuring. However, I still firmly believe in the power of human talent. It is the most powerful thing. Everything that we've done at my center in the research, we've produced hundreds of analyses We've done all these things. People are the most important aspect. So I think the mindset is agility and teaming. I do think, there was was it PricewaterhouseCoopers, or it was one of these, I forget exactly which consulting firm. They showed what AI and a highly motivated team could do versus just a highly motivated team. And AI generally was better. So I think while as an artist you might want to be a purist and say this is only human designed, and there's a reason to do that, but I think there's a lot of us are going to want to figure out how to work with the systems and figure out this human-machine teaming question and figure out how to use these tools and then recognize it's going to change every 6 months, which means that I spent a lot of years in school getting a PhD, really specializing, and I don't know exactly what the best path is, but I do believe continual education. You're not going to be done with a degree and say, oh, I've been trained. I can go until I die. That's not going to happen. You're basically going to have to recognize it's continuous learning. I do worry a little bit about radiology as I'm not trying to pick on the radiologists here. I'm just simply saying that I think that's going to morph a little bit because we need humans to be reading these materials and engaging, but it's going to be probably more and more a human-machine teaming exercise that will be in play. Did I answer that question?
Yeah. Maybe just following up on it, what would you think are some of the particular skills students should be developing right now? Are there some kinds of skills you don't anticipate would be automated away for at least 10, 15, 20 years? What are some really uniquely human skills that aren't likely to be automated?
Yeah.
Or what are some technical competencies students should be trying to? Should everyone go out and take a programming class, or what should they be doing?
Yeah, so curiosity is gold. Overactive curiosity, questions, and ability to engage with humans. That's going nowhere. I really have a pretty sanguine view or positive view of trades, electrical work, plumbing, all these things. There's a future there, and you're going to be. We used to predict all those jobs would go away, but the world I'm looking at right now, those are really solid jobs. In terms of skills, I think you still need to know how to write, but probably not a 5-paragraph essay about Abraham Lincoln and his demise. I think that pro forma writing is not nearly as relevant as make a case for helping me understand why this is important, or what are the really kernel issues here that John Stuart Mill is dealing with in his On Liberty, and how does that translate to today's world where you have AI systems promoting information and you want free speech. That's an essay that's not trivial to write, and that's where you need to be able to communicate very clearly and think through those issues. So critical thinking, creativity. I do think technical skills matter. One of the reasons I'm very glad I went to Andrews University and got a bachelor's in physics and a PhD is I have grounding. You can't shake me. I know stuff. And it allows me to have conversations, and it makes me much less of a feather in the wind. The more firm I have, I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense. That does not comport with my experience. And having those deep skills allow you to engage and not be scared off by fancy scientists who are yelling at you that you're wrong. You're like, no, I've lived a life. I know what I'm doing, and this does not make sense. And so whatever it takes to get that grounding and that depth, I think it's worth doing it because it makes you much more engaging and able to engage with others in a productive way.
That's great. In your presentation, you talked about deep fakes.
Yeah.
And some of the ways in which we don't know what to trust, right? I'm scrolling through my social media, and is this an actual video footage or is this an actual photo? And this can have serious implications. Election week, if deepfakes start coming out, the days leading up to elections. As we move to a zero-trust society, where we don't know what to trust, what's real, what's fake, what are some of the ways individually and as a community we can try and safeguard against this?
So there's technical means, which we're going to be trying to implement. So being able to put in deepfakes information threads that are easy to find, so that you can quickly determine, oh no, this was made with synthetic material, this was synthetically made. Those kinds of technical solutions people are working on them. I'm hopeful that some of them will work very well. But as a community, this is actually really challenging how we think. So Daniel Kahneman has this concept of type 1 system thinking and system 2 thinking, where you're just like, your immediate response is type 1, is like, oh, tiger, run. And your type 2 system is more pensive. We've survived thanks to a very effective type 1 system. And we've got to figure out how to, each one of us, how to take a breath. Okay, is Joe Biden saluting the Nazi flag? Probably not. Okay, that's a very good image, looks really convincing, and you have to engage that system too, and slow down, wait, and think. And I think that kind of protocol, that kind of process is going to be so important. And ask questions. Like someone, this is a management technique that I use all the time. People come running in, the world is ending today. And my response is, okay, tell me a little more. What's happening? I ask questions. And at the end of the day, okay, one of the pipes burst in the bathroom. Got it. We're going to be okay. But the bathroom is really a mess. Let's call maintenance, and we can solve this. And that kind of process of asking those questions takes a level of maturity that is hard to develop, but I think it's going to be really important that we develop those kind of skills. Anyway, I wish I had a cleaner answer, but also, we used to get internet email that, from a Nigerian prince that suddenly had lots of money. And we kind of got wise to that. So I think as a society, we're going to get more and more wise to the reality. We've got to ask these questions.
Yeah, maybe the challenge is how deepfakes intersect with polarization, right? Because when you have an image and a significant fraction of the country want that to be the case, or just yesterday the case of the bombing in Gaza, right?
Yeah.
Very few people were waiting to see what the evidence is. Let's immediately assign blame, right?
So I was an intelligence analyst working for the federal government, where I was looking at classified information. And one of the trainings they gave me was called Denial and Deception class. Basically, how can someone else convince you that something is not true? And I spent an entire class being challenged on my biases. It turns out I've got a really few weaknesses that you tell me about history, and I am putty in your hands. I'm like, oh, history. That must be true. And you can tell me all sorts of lies by giving me historical examples. So use that against me if you wish. But I spent a lot of time recognizing the kinds of biases that I play with that lead me astray. And I think it's really important, because the best way to lie to someone, and this was the other part of the class, is to tell them what they want to hear. And they will believe you because they desperately want that to be true. There's so many examples in society where this happens, and I think we've really got to combat that. I really do recommend plumbing, like the plum, exploring your biases, where you're susceptible, where you fall down, where you're easily convinced, what you desperately want to be true. It's actually really worth writing a list of all the things you desperately want to be true, because those are the areas where you will fall the most rapidly.
You're discussing human biases. Of course, AI trained on human data begins to reflect our biases, and you highlighted some of the ways that happens. And then there's a concern that as we have more and more AI-generated content, it's just going to continue to be training itself on its own content and end up with perhaps junk. Are there any ways we can try to make our AI systems safeguarded against such bias? And how might we try to detect if a system is biased, right?
Yeah, so the first issue is this data provenance, like what data was actually used to train this system is a really important question that helps. And so that's a technical question for those who are training the systems. And I think it's extremely important that we develop that. The second part of your question was, about
when AI produces more and more content, 5, 10 years If most of the text on the internet becomes AI generated,
Yeah.
and now it's training itself on its own.
Yeah, it'll become a muddle. I mean, so the prediction right now is it'll become a stew of parts and pieces of everything nice that's no longer nice. And it's just kind of like, nah. And I think there is some real reason to be concerned about that. So I think AI systems, there are a number of markets which are recognizing this, and they're training on higher and higher quality data. And there's some of these new language models that are being trained on selected data that is more and higher quality. So there are people trying to develop products that, like for medical diagnoses, you don't want to just train on the image, on everything on the internet for that, because there's some really crazy stuff on the internet. And so that's where those kind of specialized systems might really start to win out in capabilities.
Somebody wants you to prophesy.
You might be
In
disappointed.
10 to 15 years, what will AI be capable of? And perhaps for some additional context on that, you would show this image of valleys, right? When I saw the jump from ChatGPT 3 to 4, I immediately extrapolate what will 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 look like, and I'm imagining 10 years from now, what are the limits of this system? But perhaps that's not the right way to think about it. These things are very computationally expensive. Maybe we're going to start reaching some computational limits pretty soon. Maybe there are data issues
We're
that we
already
talked
seeing
about,
limitations,
right?
yeah.
Right. So are we going to hit a wall? Or maybe there are other kinds of walls where we anticipate we'll keep moving to that general intelligence, but maybe there's some kind of walls that we just won't be able to get past with our current methods. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so historically, sorry about I just moved my mic, I apologize. Historically, we've never been very good at forecasting. So I think we need to take a big old anti-hubris pill, swallow it, let it take its effect, and then kind of look about the future. Compute, we're showing signs of that amazing compute trajectory we've been on slowing down. It's slowing down a fair amount. I'm not saying it's not going to be a source of innovation. High quality data is really hard to find. So we've just resorted to everything on the internet, which has actually turned out pretty cool, but there probably is a wall there that we have to figure out how to get over and how to create that higher quality data. There's some super exciting ideas in algorithms that could open up innovation. But when I look toward the future, the thing I am confident of is human-machine teaming matters. Figuring out how to work effectively with a team, as a team, and trusting when to trust it and when not to trust it. Like GPS, when we first got GPS, people drove off into lakes. And people, like, I remember reading a story of a lady who left Belgium and ended up in, like, Italy or something. And she was supposed to go north, but she entered the wrong address, and she never bothered to, like, stop and say, why am I not there yet? And so those kinds of, blindly following systems is a really a problem. But so learning how to trust these systems, I think, is extremely important. In terms of like what the next generation of capabilities are, we'll probably have little agents working for us that do multiple steps of tasks very soon, where we can basically say, I want this goal, and it breaks it into a bunch of little tasks and then goes and does that. It'll probably get better and better, and it's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be a part of most of our lives. I think most of us will be using it. I think the 60s said no, or 50s, there was a forecast that no one will have shovels anymore. Because, steam shovels will take care of all of it. But it turns out we still need a cheap way to move some dirt in the garden, and we don't want to afford some massive steam shovel. So there's a lot of needs for like simple systems, things that will not have a fancy AI in it. Anyway, I'm not a very good forecaster. I've spent most of my life forecasting, which is really sad to say. But I'm concerned that I don't see the future very well. I see it worse here than in other areas. Back in World War I, around that time, aviation, planes were being created, chemical weapons were being created, tanks were being created, and the military, I understand, actually kind of recognized we cannot predict the future. Everything is changing so much. their contracts, rather than making 20-year contracts, they started holding back the contract. And that's kind of how I feel right now. I'm really not sure what the future is going to hold. I just know it's going to change rapidly. And we got to hold on, and we need to keep our brains fully engaged and watching what's happening and adapting.
It's been said the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? Do you anticipate that AI's impact will be to increase or decrease disparities?
Yeah. So I'm reading a book right now on this topic, and right now I'm in the middle of the book where it's increasing. I really worry about this. One of the beauties of the United States of America is we have a concept that we can innovate. And anybody, I don't care who you are, can be part of this innovation and thinking. And if we stop believing that, I'm terrified. We've got to continue moving forward in that path. I do worry about the income disparity. There's a lot of parts of America which are being left behind, and that's not cool, because real people live there with real ideas, real needs, real capabilities, and somehow writing them off as like less of our part of our economy is just not cool at all. So one of the things that we're doing at my center is creating a talent tracking capability across the entire United States. We're looking at all the technical talent. We're starting with AI and cybersecurity and semiconductor technologies, and we're tracking where is talent, people dropping out of the talent pipeline, where is talent being underutilized, and all across the United States. This is one of my attempts to try to deal with this uneven distribution and be able to highlight where talent could be utilized and how it could be utilized, and give employers new ideas about how to engage with that talent. So I'm actively combating this personally and as professionally at my center, and I think it's really important that we all actively combat this, because this is not a magic, oh, it'll work out, everything will go fine. It's going to require intentional efforts to not go off the rails.
One last question. You're a graduate of Andrews University. Now you're back here. What's one thing we can do as a university?
What was that?
What's one thing we can do as a university?
I think AI literacy for all domains, whether you're a teacher, people are scared as teachers. Oh, don't let my students use that because they won't learn anything. I think there's ways to actually learn with AI in a particularly interesting way. We didn't get into personalized learning. There's so many exciting things there, but even the technology today, I think embracing it, teaching people how to use it, learning how to use it yourself, as an educational institution, giving a forum to make those mistakes and figure out how to use these technologies wisely is going to serve you much more than saying, oh, I don't let AI in my classroom, because it's going to be part of our society. I think, so this is not just STEM. STEM also has a particularly important role in mathematics, engineering, physics, and biology too, are all relevant fields that open the mind, and there's a lot of interesting career options that I think should continually be pursued with and without AI. But I think even there you want to explore how these systems will change how research is done, and give people the opportunity to explore and fail. I really strongly believe that we need that trial and error space in a supervised, safe environment to learn how to use these things.
Let's thank the speaker one more time. And we have Alex Navarro coming to the stage. Alex is a current physics, math student minoring in computing who has a gift to give you on our behalf.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
We all enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming out. Have a great evening.